still having a little bit of a celebration backstage, but all right, well, we load this final bit up. I'm very excited to call out the team from The Big Sick. Let's call out our director first, Michael Showalter. Michael. There he is. Sorry, man. I explained we were having a victory celebration backstage.
Oh, yeah.
There's lots of snacks involved.
Yeah. Should I sit down or should I be
Please.
standing?
Well, they're your team. Maybe that's a nice thing to honor them. Please welcome Kumail Nanjiani and Emily V. Gordon.
Hello,
and the one,
everybody.
the only,
Hi.
Holly Hunter.
Doug Jones.
Roy Moore is not conceding, though, which is
Well,
it's so
Hilarious.
on brand.
What? I think he hasn't conceded the Civil War. So,
Yeah.
let's get in line, kids.
Get on that horse and keep going into the sunset.
So enough about that place.
That
But
place.
it did kind of ruin my opening quote-unquote joke. I'm not going to call it a joke because you people actually know what jokes are, but I was going to welcome Steven Spielberg to the evening tonight.
That's a Twitter-related joke.
I know, this is ancient joke now, but
The world moves so fast now.
it's
By the time you're done
exhausting.
typing, it's like moved on. It's crazy. It's too much.
in the case of this evening, that's good, right? We've moved on from horses named Sassy, I believe. So, anyway.
I have
What-
nothing. I want to be clear. Nothing against the horse. I feel like people have been making fun of Sassy. This is not on Sassy.
There is a lot of fuck you on the horse you rode in on, too. So Sassy's getting a lot of nasty.
Yeah.
It's not very fair. I wanted to really start with the amazing way that your film has connected with audience. And I do think that that has something to do with your unrelenting positivity. And that kind of speaks to all of you through the process, obviously, of creating this work, working together to make it, and then putting it out into the world. And that is something we need. We have had a glimmer of it this evening out in the world, but really what I've been coming back to as a film guy is how great it is we live in a moment where there's so much wonderful cinema to remind us of beauty and positivity and love. And you guys have been delivering that in spades, even through, adversity or whatever, which is where my Spielberg joke was leading, because I thought that was actually a really elegant thing to do yesterday, and very, very funny. So I just want to talk about that. How has it been putting this work out in this exact moment? Because you didn't anticipate necessarily putting this film out in this type of moment. And what's that been like?
I think, no, we certainly didn't. When we've been writing this movie since 2012. It took a lot of work. It wasn't just kind of us putting our lives down on paper. And so we kind of really worked on crafting a movie version of our lives and of our story. And I think I kind of do agree with you that I think cynicism has had a moment for quite some time. And I've absolutely have gone in on cynicism. I love it too. But I think, especially because we were talking about our families who are very dear to us and our relationship, which is pretty dear to us. Yeah, just for fun. I think there was no way we could have approached this from a cynical point of view. I think we both kind of, when we started working on this, made a decision that we were just going to kind of lay it all out there as much as we could and kind of be really open and honest and vulnerable. Even though it was very vulnerable, that's the story we wanted to tell. And so I really liked hearing you say that, because I like cynicism as much as anyone else, but I think positivity is the most punk rock thing you can do right now, and so I am all for it.
Yeah, sincerity is punk rock.
It's hell.
I really think so. I mean, it's like, it's kind of dangerous, right? I mean, we were at a time where sincerity wasn't cool, and I think there is a return to it. I saw it as a comedian a few years ago. I started seeing this shift in comedy, where it sort of went from making fun of stuff or it being about stuff you hate to being about stuff you love. I just saw like the comedians that were sort of the next wave that were coming were all generally positive, optimistic people. And their comedy was generally positive and optimistic. So I really think we're in a beautifully sincere phase, and some of it has come because of some bad stuff. But you know, there's
And it's also sincerity that isn't plastic.
No.
That feels, it's like warts and all. This is what it is. This is what life is. That's the stuff I'm drawn to.
Yeah, and I thought about this a bunch, where it was like there are two ways to go about, I think, dealing with the times we're in. You can either fight against something, and that's valid, or you can fight for something, and that's valid. And I decided that I think I would be best if I fought for something rather than against. And I think fighting against is also a very, very valid option.
Well,
it is interesting because I think fighting for something in a way is harder than fighting against something. I mean, it's a reactionary kind of position to fight against. You're being done unto, so it's easy to rail against that. But I also find that the positivity of the movie really does come from an organic thing, and it transcends the political. Even though I feel like the movie's really political, it's not at all. I mean, it wasn't made. You guys didn't make it with any agenda in mind at all, and there was never one presented to us as a cast, either from you, Mike, or from either one of you guys. I mean, the script just doesn't deal with that, but it deals with it really, flagrantly, but not. I mean, it's a beautiful line that the movie travels in that way, and I think it's very delectable because of that. I mean, it's very easy to receive because it's not a conscious message.
It actually speaks to what was going to be, or what is my next question, and direct this to you, Director Showalter. And it goes to the complex nature of comedy, which applied to the complex nature of cultural difference seems to be a hell of a thing to try and orchestrate, and yet you do so quite beautifully, as described, because it does connect with audiences. But what, for you walking in, I mean, how did you start to tap your baton on the thing and start orchestrating this thing? How did you think about tackling, layering the complexity of the cultural difference on the complex nature of, comedy itself, but in relationship to an actual comedian character?
That's a big question.
No, it's time.
When I first read the script, I felt, and we talked about this, I felt that the movie was about many things for me. It was about, it's a love story. It's about family, reconciling our family, choosing a career path, and taking the sort of some of the risks that come along with discovering something that you love and pursuing that. I was a comedian, and so that there's a shared experience of, I think all comedians have, which is that moment where you decide, and artists have it too, I'm sure, you break it to your parents, like, I'm gonna do this. There's no grad school for it. And so that was something I really identified with, and maybe was the seed for me in terms of what I sort of centered myself in with it. It's about identity, of what it means to be an American citizen. Religious identity, religious difference, sickness, dealing with a loved one and potentially losing a loved one, love, death. And I really felt like it's all of those things. And is there a way to possibly articulate all of that in this movie? And we just kind of tackled it one thing at a time, and sort of let each one of those things be it's, be all of, we didn't try to say it's got to be more this than that and more this than that. It was just want every single one of those pieces to be given its due. And I think comedically, there was always this challenge of how can the movie be funny in the whole long section in the middle where she's in a coma, which is so not funny. And so how do we avoid being, tragic and maudlin, but also not go so far in the other direction that we're like Weekend at Bernie's, that we're doing like
That would have been a different direction, yeah.
well, that we're doing like coma jokes for an hour, like where it's like, haha, she's in a coma, isn't that funny? I mean, it's not funny.
hilarious.
It's not funny. And so, we and really what it came down to was hours and 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 hours of us talking about it before we started, way before we even started bringing in our amazing cast and all of that.
Well, that was going to be my next follow-on, because it seems like part of the crazy solution to that was maybe bringing in someone like Holly Hunter, but that also seems like totally fraught with peril, right? Because this is not an actor who's known for fading into the wallpaper. I mean, she's a force who came and delivered a force into a project that, we have faith in you. You've demonstrated you can deal with forceful actors. But it does seem, and obviously it was the right choice. You completely brought out a lot in the other characters through the force of will that Beth has in your performance. But it does seem like, wow, are we really going to turn this movie over to Holly Hunter and Ray Romano for that matter?
You mean like after getting to know Kumail and you mean like that shift?
Yeah, that shift.
Yeah, that's the needle that's the needle that is thread in this movie and that was always a feeling of the movie lives and dies around if that transition if the audience can stay with the movie over that in that transition to where the Zoe Kazan Emily character goes away and is replaced by, thank God, these unbelievably amazing actors in Ray and Holly to kind of take the movie from there. Yeah. And then we talked about that in a way we get to know Emily's character again through them. It's like we get to meet her. We wanted to make sure that you felt like Kumail's getting to know her even in more deeply in her absence. He's getting to know sides of her that he never would have been able to access in a different situation, but then twist it to where then he's had this epiphany, and then she comes out of her coma and is like, well, I wasn't there for that, so I don't know what like that's great that you think you know me all or whatever, but
it's such an unusual story that this movie the balancing act that the movie accomplishes, I think, is incredible. But I do believe that it's kind of a truly original thing to tell this love story between a guy and his future in-laws. That's just that.
I mean, when you're dating someone, part of that is that you are dating the people they've come from, and it's something that I feel like we don't. Rom-coms always end when the couple gets together, and then I'm always like, well, what happens when you have to go meet those parents and they're nightmare people?
Someone should make a movie called Meet the Parents.
Oh yeah, and then we should make a second one.
Yeah, we should name
a third and a fourth.
We should name the main guy's last name Fuckers. No, that's too
no.
direct.
Fackers.
Fackers, that's it.
Fackers is close.
We'll do Meet the Fackers next.
Meet the Fackers. Yeah, that's one thing I think I've gotten to know. I've fallen more in love with Kumail through his parents because I see little shades of them and him and them, and I think that's such a lovely part of romance that you just don't really. It's real. It's not lust. It's like actual love, and you don't really see that in movies very often.
And one of the things that you asked about, Raj, was having like strong, smart people in a collaboration. I think it can be tempting when you have a movie that has sort of a bigger cast and there's a lot of stories to tell, that you have people maybe recede into the background a little bit. But I think it should be the opposite. I think what you do is you get really strong, smart people like Ray and Holly and
Zoe.
Anupam and Zenobia and Zoe and everyone, and just get together and trust that if we all want to make, if as long as we're all on the same page about the type of thing we want to make, that we can talk enough and get to the point where we're all really happy, and that the thing you make will be better for it. I mean, you know, we had, Holly and I, the four of us had very long conversations, you know. There were certain times where Holly would read the script and say, I don't think Beth would say this. And we would be like, why? And then she would explain it to us, and that would make sense. And then we would work together and find something. This was all, you know, we had weeks of rehearsal before shooting. After Holly had agreed to do the movie with us, we had weeks and weeks of rehearsal. This wasn't on set. So, but what the great thing was, we got to know each other as people, and we got to know these characters. And we rehearsed so much that by the time we got to set, we knew exactly what we needed to get. Because it was a very low-budget movie. We had to get a lot of
Very fast.
pages every day.
Yeah. No, because look, I mean, I have a mother-in-law, and there were certain moments where I just wanted to, you know, crawl under whatever hospital table you were sitting, you know, in front of her, because it's like, yeah, how am I going to speak to this person? You know, obviously her mother knows her, you know.
You usually have that buffer there of the person that you're
Yes.
dating.
Yeah.
No buffer here. Yep.
No buffer.
No buffer, baby.
Yeah.
So abrupt shift in tone, and I do want to open it up to the audience after this question, so get your questions ready, and talk about the stand-up scene. And there's some great stand-up moments in this film, and obviously stand-up comedy scene. Whoa,
Drunk.
Stay
No,
with
not.
us.
I'm fine.
Drunk on Jones, it's good.
Drunk on Jones. Drunk
Yeah.
on Jones.
It's zeitgeist, right? Like there's a lot of interest in the stand-up scene. You guys are veterans of it, but what I take away most often from depictions of, you know, not actually being in a comedy club, but seeing depictions of it, is that vulnerability that people are placing upon themselves to go up and do this thing in front of an audience. And you know, I mean, this moment of the 19 of our best or whatever, I mean, that is an incredible moment.
Not even on stage.
Not, yeah, no. I mean, but you know, the heckling, all of that, like to put yourself in that vulnerable position, it just seems like also metaphorical for a lot of things that we should try and do. I don't know. I'm just speak to the interest that might be out there in stand-up as part of a culture right now.
I really thought, you know, I had this sort of epiphany while I've been doing stand-up for a few years, and I understood, like, as a comedian, being yourself on stage is the hardest thing. And it takes years and years and years for you to be yourself and for it to seem effortless, you know? And so in the movie, and Mike, you know, has done a lot of stand-up, and this is stuff that we talked about a lot. Actually, we set up a show in New York before we started shooting, and I was going to do a half hour of material so that Mike could pick the material. And Mike said that I was...
Too good.
No, come on. Mike said that I was too comfortable on stage. You said that this character is not comfortable with himself in any aspect of his life. So he's not comfortable in his relationship with his parents. He's not comfortable in his relationship with his girlfriend. He's not comfortable in stand-up. He's just someone who is uncomfortable with himself in every aspect.
Because he's not honest with himself.
Yeah, he's not engaging with himself, and hence he's not engaging with the people around him.
Well, Kumail has gotten to a place where when he goes on stage now, he like owns the stage, you know. And I remember even myself, like it takes a long time before you have the confidence doing comedy to even go 2 or 3 feet
Just
to
stay
either
like-
side of the mic, right?
You hold it
I mean,
like
to
this.
literally drift any amount away from the microphone stand is something that takes a while. And then the more comfortable you get, the bigger that space gets to where the whole stage is then you just get to and so when he did that show, that's what it was. It was like watching, you know, a Billy Squier concert or something.
Who's Billy Squier?
I know. But no, but
Exactly.
he was, you know, he was walking all over. He was
There's
he
Wi-Fi
was,
too.
He was all over the stage, and I just felt like our Kumail isn't there yet. He's just not
He might
there
be there
yet.
at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
he's
like
approaching
he's
being
just
there, but
not there yet. He's still stuck at the mic stand, kind of.
Yeah, and we actually do that. If you notice, nobody has ever noticed it, but I bring it up. To me, it was a big thing in my stand-up when I went from leaving the mic in the stand in front of me, like this wall between me and the audience, and in the whole movie, it's like that, to when I took the mic out and I just sort of felt like myself, and you can move around then. And if you notice in the last scene of stand-up, I have the mic in my hand, and the stand is not there. So
You're like, who's this guy?
yeah, so all this little stuff that we put into the movie that we wanted to show sort of the growth of his character, like this little stuff, like the scenes where I have a backpack versus the scenes where I don't have a backpack. You know, these were all like conversations that I had with my acting teacher about.
And also what your material is about, because
Right.
And I will say, even when you and I actually started dating, your material was all very funny but very observational. And then as we were kind of in the overall relationship,
Nothing
is
wrong with observational stand-up.
so funny. It's great. But then you started getting kind of
I like prop comedy.
Those were your Seinfeld years?
then you started kind of getting more honest and actually talking about yourself and talking about your upbringing and talking about yourself as a Pakistani man living in America. And you see that the only bit in the whole movie where he's talking about his parents is the final bit where he's in New York. And we kind of talk through all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, another thing was also the way that the comedians interact with each other, the relationship that the comedians have as friends, and is another thing. Is I think comedians, when we're alone, tend to we riff, we talk comedically, and I would equate it to the when I sort of like, if you've ever been around a bunch of musicians, they like bust out their guitars and just start jamming, and you're like, I gotta go, you know. It's like it's just not fun for
Santa
anybody
Cruz,
that's
yeah,
not them. And comedians are kind of the same way, you know. We sit in a room and we like just make fun of each other and we rag on each other, and it's nonstop sarcasm and nonstop kind of this weird passive aggressive one-upping thing. But that's actually love. That's actually how we talk to each other. That's the vocabulary that we have. And so that's what I wanted to show. We wanted to show that too, the way that he connects to his comedian friends. It's very competitive. They're hard on each other. They're making fun of each other. But they're actually expressing deep love and affection that they have for each other. So it was another thing that we wanted to show about the comedy side of it, because that's so much of who Kumail is and the story that we were telling.
Well, bravo on accomplishing that in spades. Yes, let's go right there in the middle, the blonde. And there's a mic coming up. Hold on just a second.
We can probably hear you, though.
I think there's...
Thank you. Hi. Loved the film. It was beautiful. And obviously, it was such a very, very personal story for you two to tell. So my question is for Kumail and Emily. I'm interested in knowing what the most challenging part of telling this story was. If it was hard to confront some of the things, because obviously it's very heavy. If it was hard to bring people unfamiliar with it into the story, or like what challenges did you face in translating this to the screen?
I think, if anything, bringing other people into it was the easier part of it, because everyone that we worked with, because we kept, people keep saying it's collaboration. We kind of from the beginning had people say it to us, and it got in our heads of like, this isn't just our story. This is a story that we're all going to create and tell. And so it can't just be like, oh, it didn't happen this way. Actually, I was wearing a sweater like this. None of that. We let go of that very quickly, and it only made the story better. So I think that part was easy. The hard part, I think, was us for me, the digging back into some of the relationship stuff that was happening early on in our relationship, and having to like rehash some of those, like, yeah, you were. Oh my God, you were so non-committal. Oh my, and having to go back through and kind of really dig back into that.
The fact that I got away with it for that long,
Yeah.
pretty good at
Very
it.
long time. I think, that stuff was challenging. And obviously, digging back into the coma was an incredibly kind of challenging and traumatic thing for both of us to go through, because as much as you say you've talked about it, you haven't really talked about it until you've written many versions of a script about it. And so that, I would say, those were the biggest challenges.
Yeah, one of the weird things about writing something like this that's so personal is when you're like sort of excavating a past version of yourself, and in doing that you're finding the problems that you had then, but you're also finding some of the problems you have now. So for instance, it was for me, some of the obviously the Emily's sickness stuff was very, very difficult because we hadn't really thought about that. To me, it was like this crazy thing that happened, and then all this energy spent not thinking about it. And so writing this movie was like opening up that black box and being like, all right, let's sift through moment by moment what it felt like and live through that again. So that was very difficult. The other thing was, for me, realizing some of the things in my personal life that I needed to do, right? So for instance, I realized that in my relationship with my parents, for instance, I realized that I needed to do work to have an adult relationship with my parents. I realized while in the course of writing the movie that I was still like I was a kid in front of them, right? And I think that's one of the challenges of growing up is how you go from a pretty clear power differential, people you've known your whole life, they're your parents, to then when you're both adults, you kind of have to have a new relationship. You have to figure out how to be with each other. And so I realized that that was something I needed to work on. So the movie, one of the things the movie's about is me learning, my character learning to have an adult relationship with Emily's parents, and then taking what I've learned to my parents and just doing the first step. So in the movie, when I asked my dad what movie they went to see, that's really me trying to find out about their love, about their relationship as people rather than as parents, you know. So that's what that's meant to convey. It's like step one of there's a lot more work to be done after the credits roll, but you see that it's the first step of figuring out how to be a grown-up in front of my parents. But learning about stuff like that and then writing stuff from my parents, writing lines for my parents. And then for the first time, really understanding their perspective on what I was doing was really, really eye-opening. It's, you know, when you sit there and you write like what your dad said to you in that moment and what your mom said to you in that moment, when you type those words out, you understand their perspective in a way, at least I did, in a way that I had not before. So
And we weren't just writing their lines. We were creating things for them to say. So you have to really sit in other people's perspectives and where they are to be able to create an argument, craft an argument of like why what you're doing is wrong. And I think doing that I think it's really therapeutic for everyone to do with their partners, with their parents, with everyone.
yeah, I just really got a real appreciation and understanding of their perspective through all this, like what they were struggling through and still continue to struggle through, and how that is it's a very noble fight that they have.
Do we have one on this side? Yeah, we'll get you right there.
Hi. So I was really interested in the difference between how, Kumail, you and your brother, you handled your family's expectations of you, how your brother seemed to assimilate, or how you assimilated into American expectations, and how your brother, he kind of kept to family-like expectations. And I was just wondering why you think that difference happened, and if it was more of like personal attributes or what happened there.
No, first of all, I don't think I see my character as assimilating into American culture. I see my character as someone who's deciding how to reconcile two very different identities, his Pakistani identity and his American identity, in a way that is true to himself, but also reverential to both those identities, you know? And my brother in the movie, who's not based on my real brother, my brother in the movie has done the same thing. He has already reconciled his Pakistani identity with his American identity. He's figured out how to do both things together. I mean, that's why we have him playing baseball, but also talking about how, you know, he was arranged married, and that was the right thing for him. And we really wanted to have that perspective, because it can be very easy in a movie, in an American movie about a brown guy falling in love with a white woman. It can be very easy for the Brown family to be, they're the underdogs in this situation. So you really have to make sure that their perspective has a voice, you know. So that's why we had my brother as someone who is in a very happy arranged marriage. My parents are in a very happy arranged marriage as well, because we wanted to show, you know, it's a valid system. It just wasn't for my character.
And there's no one way to be a Pakistani person in America.
Yeah. And also, I think, to me in the movie, My brother is further ahead in his development. My brother is more of a complete person than my character is. I'm sort of pushing things aside and trying not to think, and my brother, I think, has fully engaged with everything and made his decisions, and is living a very happy and satisfying life because of that. So we wanted to show that me not engaging myself has led to this guy who's uncomfortable in his own skin and is pushing all his worlds aside, whereas my brother will sit there with a Cubs hat and talk about, you know, why he has a beard and why
He conditions it.
Yeah, and he conditions his beard, you know. So that's East
That's
meets
American.
West right there.
It's important. No, but I do think about how, I mean, you guys launched this film way back in January, nearly a year ago, and it really has stayed a part of the conversation, certainly in cinema, but I think more broadly culturally. And part of the reason for me, anyway, is how our appreciation for these characters has grown and their kind of everyday bravery, and in a way, in particular, Beth's bravery. Because she's someone who exists in a realm where she shouldn't necessarily have to have her beliefs challenged, but by meeting Kumail and being put into this situation, she does, and she starts to question some of her ideas. And I was just wondering, and that seems, again, very poignant to this moment. Again, it wouldn't necessarily have been when you developed it, but for a character like Beth, it actually seems important that we're getting to know her at this moment.
But I think that, you know, the crux of the issue, you know, in the beginning of the story for Beth is that he didn't treat her daughter well.
Amen.
Not that he's brown. Mm-hmm. It's not that. It's that he was disrespectful and dishonest. Mm. He is deceitful. It's the deceit that I think makes my character feel so protective of my daughter, and and one of the things that I've said this before, but you know, like at one of the very last gestures that my character makes in the movie is I really wanted to protect this idea that my daughter, that our daughter, mine and Ray's daughter, we were in a very adult relationship with her. That's something that you're observing, you're perceiving that, and all the time too. So that was a consistent piece of the puzzle that was always being revealed in slightly different ways, even to the very last gesture when I come to Emily and I say, it's time for us to go home. And she's like, oh God, really? I don't know if I'm ready. And I say, you're ready. And even that is two adult women speaking to each other. You know, with the mother, instead of being the smothering, overbearing mother, is the mother saying, keep going. You are great on your own. You can do this by yourself. And I thought that once again, just that incredible validation from a mother to a daughter is something that you don't get to see that often expressed in movies. And you guys gave Zoe and me the opportunity to keep revealing that all the way to that, you know, kind of one of my last scenes in the movie.
Well, but and even the first time where you say, you know,
we know everything.
We have no secrets. Yeah. We know
right.
about the. We know about
started there.
We know about the cigar box. We know about the headshots, which is also, it's also, and I'm remembering as you're talking now, we talk about this, like it never would occur to Kumail that she would have said that to you.
Yeah.
And so he's like, what? She told you that stuff? Like, that's so, his relationship with his parents is all smoke and mirrors. And so it's a complete paradigm shift for him when you say that to him, because it's like, what?
Yeah, and my relationship with my parents is the reason that it's not as deep as it should be is my character's
on your
fault.
Right.
My parents are constantly trying to engage with me. My parents are telling me their truth over and
he
over
says-
and over, and they want to talk about
And
it.
your father says to you in that last scene, why didn't you tell
why
us the
didn't you
truth? Why
tell
didn't
us
you
the
tell us the truth?
Right. And so we wanted to have that. And, that was one of the things of this movie was we have a character who's pretty deceitful in the beginning. And, I find, that sometimes you see movies and the people who wrote them are acting in them and they show themselves as these, like, really amazing, super funny people who just have it together and they're the truth tellers and they're the voice of the author the entire time. And one of the things that we talked about in this movie was we wanted every character in this movie to be funny. There's a writer-director that, plays himself and always has the funniest lines. We did not want that. We wanted everyone to be funny.
Ow, whoa.
Wait, what did I say?
I'm just saying.
I think it's become... Yeah, I think it's finally safe to say that. No. And also that I was very excited while we were writing this to be able to play someone who had so much to learn and so many places to go. So that
To be so wrong.
be so wrong. To be so very, very wrong.
Very, very wrong.
Like the wrongest. And
But very likable, in a very likable way.
And super handsome. I
So-
mean,
so handsome.
I mean, charming AF.
well, look, guys, you've been so generous being here with. I know you have to get up to London, but I just want to give actually a little personal thank you. So my dad immigrated to this country, South Asian guy, and married a tall blonde, and she's sitting right there. And I just want to thank you for, in a way, this isn't their story at all; it's yours. But
We're your
and
parents.
I've never seen a movie about. You're my parents. Oh my God! Congrats, guys! You did really well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
But thank you guys.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Very nice. Thank you.